Good morning, everybody. It is a
Good
very chilly
morning.
Thursday. Yeah, how you doing, Pumi? Yes, look, it's so cold here. I'm sure it is where you are. Everywhere.
Colder than a witch's tit, I tell you.
It's my favorite saying. Imagine how cold a witch's tit has to be for that to be the expression.
Love
Beautiful.
it.
All right, well, it's Thursday. And today is your chance to find out what's actually going on with a bunch of people who really know their stuff. And one of those people is Pumi. I haven't spoken to you all week, but I mean, you must be in the same mindset as so many of us at the moment, just like looking around going, what the hell is going on here?
But guys, we had this conversation.
You got friends and family in KZN, and I know that Siposhezi, who we were talking to last Thursday, is in Pietermaritzburg. Which has been like, in some ways, the nexus of all of this. He predicted this.
Did we not say chaos will be in the streets?
Yep.
So look, you gotta see what my good morning, guys.
And right.
That's my mindset. That's my mindset today. Right. For all of the friends who were here who heard the phrase Zitande. Keep that in mind today. Today, it's even more important than it ever was.
So, are there
Thank you to Dusi.
Yeah, are there any people who you feel have surprised you in the last little while? Have you been pleasantly or unpleasantly surprised by anybody's behavior since we last spoke about all of these goings on the show last week?
I have been not surprised by many things. I have been my heart was lifted when I saw some community members coming together. I'm very proud of my Logish Pimville because Maponya Mall, and we also have a strip mall called Pimville Square. Unlooted, not touched. Community members patrolling, keeping looters at bay. That made me warm and fuzzy. South Africans getting up. I was worried, and this morning I woke up to a trending topic that has. I was worried about how this would play out along racial lines, which we saw a little bit of it happening on Monday already, Tuesday. And this morning I woke up to one of the trending topics is Phoenix Massacre. So Phoenix is an Indian township, and there are horrific videos on the timeline of people in paramilitary, Indian people in paramilitary outfits with shotguns and rifles, randomly shooting people in the street. Black people who are walking, not running with looted anything, just walking through the streets. There are videos on the timeline that are horrifying. It's trending. The topic is trending with Durban Twitter, Zulu Twitter, and y'all, it's like the purge. It's like the purge out there.
Well, everybody must stay the hell in their homes in Durban, because if you're walking around and you're looking for trouble's going to find you at the moment. I'm by no means excusing people who are walking around just randomly shooting other people. That is as bad, if not a whole lot worse in degrees than people who are opportunistically seeing a chance to grab something that isn't theirs. In fact, it's a whole lot more frightening because it seems to be just a knee-jerk reaction to what has already happened. Now, I've heard about this, and nobody in this country wants to see us go back to a tribal or an ethnic or a racial violence, one against the other. But I saw this was building up on social media over the course of yesterday as well, that there was this narrative that had started to come into play from one side and then the other, that they're coming, they're coming. Either these guys are coming to kill random black people, or that the Phoenix community was sitting there waiting for the black people to come and take them out. And I would love to hear from someone who lives in that part of the world, to actually hear from them what their feelings are. Because let me tell you something. If I heard that people were coming into my neighborhood, nameless, faceless mobs of people who were going to come and kill me, because that was the idea here, I don't know what I'd do. I really don't know what I'd do. I'm one of those people who likes to, I like to have a plan, and I don't know what my plan would be. I'm
And you're
also
a licensed gun owner.
I'm a licensed gun owner. Yeah, I'm heartened by. But listen, I'd be very, very careful before I pulled the trigger in any situation. You just have to be, because you won't be a licensed gun owner for very long if you pull the trigger in the wrong circumstances. And there are plenty of reasons for you to be extra careful when there's a huge amount of tension going. Some people get more stressful; they make bad decisions. You've got to be extra calm in situations like this, because anything can and will happen, and then you'll find yourself in hot water.
So Duduzi
Yeah,
is putting on the comments here that he's deleting Twitter because it's starting to affect his mental health.
mm-hmm.
Which
No,
is,
I hate to say it, but that's a good idea. And yesterday I suggested that people actually report anybody who is report to Twitter, because I think it takes like 10, 20 people to do this. Report people
apparently
who are
not.
violence. Oh, really?
I spent my whole Friday periodically reporting Dudu, the girl twin, Zuma.
Yeah. And you didn't get her banned?
Dudu's. She's not banned.
You didn't get her suspended even for 24 hours? Because a bunch of people got Duduzane suspended yesterday.
And Julius the day before.
And Julius, yeah.
But 7 reports. I put in 7 reports.
Right.
In the course of the day on Friday.
Right.
Like, stop this shit. And wow.
It didn't work, huh?
But it didn't. But it is one of the things that I wanted to chat about this morning. Shout out to Mbulelo. Right. Welcome.
Hello,
Thank you.
How are you doing this morning?
Sprightly, feeling good.
That orange jacket says it all.
That orange jacket means no one would be shooting at you. They think you were a traffic cone.
That's actually that's what it is. Metro Police. I look like the head of the Metro Police.
But Bolelo is the only brave member of our Cliff Central team who we've said, because he lives closest to the studio, really, can go in. Simpiwe and Homolemo and some of the others who come in every day, we've just said, look, just for this week, maybe stay at home, because we didn't know what was going to happen. I think that's probably how a lot of people who can have been behaving. But there are obviously lots and lots of people who just carried on. They've got their day going. They've got into taxis and public transport. And I've got to say again, the taxis have been pretty smart here. They've said they're going to stand against, in most places, the taxi associations have said they're standing against these looters. They'll protect shopping centers. They'll protect suburbs and neighborhoods, because they know that's where their bread and butter comes from, right? If people stop going to work, if shopping malls are burnt down, if neighborhoods fall apart, then who are they transporting anymore? Then they lose their income. So there's a selfish reason, but there's also, in really hard times, it's amazing who comes through for you. And some of the strongest people during lockdown who stood against government and their dumb regulations were the taxi people. I said from the start, we should all strive to be a little bit more like them and not just do exactly what we're told, like good servants. And the taxi industry, again, are proving themselves to be a whole lot better in some ways than everybody's given them credit for. So I'm on their side once more. And this is a recurrent theme for me, that I find myself on the side of the taxis.
Kerry, I don't know how to say Duran.
Where's Kerry?
Sending a message from Durban.
Yeah. Kerry says, we are so scared. We don't sleep. There is no help for our communities who are trying to keep us safe. We feel abandoned in KZN. Well, they've sent, 5,000 soldiers to KZN, and we've seen those soldiers are on the ground at the moment, but they're not in every part of the country, and they're not in every part of the province even. So I think they're a bit thinly stretched. But isn't it amazing that the president had to call them out of leave? We needed to stop and suspend the leave of many of our soldiers just to get 5,000 of them together. What is the size of our military? Does anybody know?
That's a good question. Does it matter?
Because if it's less than 5,000 people, it's not much of a military to speak of, is it?
Does it matter?
Well, does it matter? Exactly.
Are they?
Are they any good?
I don't know. I don't know, man. You know what? And I think what Kerry's articulating is what a lot of people are feeling all over
Abandoned.
the country, feeling anxiety, feeling panic, fear and panic for a lot of people. And and I think, getting off the 24-hour news cycle will help. Which, Bulelo, I wanted to tell you, my favorite, what's been giving me life over the past couple of days, sports journalists tweeting like the country ain't on fire. They're just like, oh, UEFA, oh,
We're
the
just carrying on.
Springboks and the Lions.
Yeah.
Oh, Boris Johnson in Parliament talking about the racial. I was like, yo, what's going on? Kaizer Chiefs going to Kosafa Cup. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
It
Although,
does.
I mean, it sounds incredibly insensitive, but people's lives are still going on. I know, like, everyone thinks the thing is to come out socially and try and be in KZN. Like, I can't. Like, my life, I don't want to be that person now who says I'm with you as though that means anything to somebody who's suffering.
You and I are pretty similar in that way. We can't do the fake compassion. I mean, I have lots and lots of friends and family in KZN, so for me, it's not hard to be involved in this, and the compassion's real. But you can't fake it like me. So if something was happening in
You're
Bucharest, I'm going to find it very hard to direct all of my attentions towards Bucharest. But I hear you. And there are lots of people, like Courtney says she's in KZN. There's no military in her area. There are people just reporting.
Ndogozo, though, says they've seen military.
Yes. Dogozo says the military just passed by in my area, but we've been manning our borders ourselves. The police haven't been helpful. They're running thin on resources. Yeah, I heard that there were some communities who were actually giving the police ammo because the police had run out of ammunition.
Well, they don't have live ammo. They don't have live ammunition. The police do not have live ammunition. They have got rubber. Obviously, this is a directive having come out of post the Marikana and Farlam commissions. So, dude, shout out to Ntogozo. As y'all know, I've been saying all along, we are our own heroes, guys. The community, you've got to know your neighbors. Know your neighbors. Know your street community. Be part of it.
As much as Pumi, you were saying that you're worried about what's going on in Phoenix at the moment, I saw again last night on the news communities of all kinds of South Africans coming together to help each other out and to get together in roadblocks, in kind of neighborhood protection patrolling services. They're all getting together and sharing the night shift and then the day shift, and these people are showing us what South Africa really looks like. And again, I'll say what I said in my piece that I wrote the other day, is that there are two ways you can go in a situation like this. You either become one of the good people who turns to the better side of your nature, and you think about protecting others, and you think about coming together, and you think about doing whatever you can, even if you're exhausted and you're tired and you're worried and you're scared and you're nervous and you're anxious. Or you become one of those people who gives in to your base desires, and you just see yourself as an opportunist and a loser in society and someone who needs to take revenge. And you can be one of those two people. And everybody has the capacity to choose. And that's what I do like about situations like this, awful as they are, is that they force people to make a decision about themselves. And you get to see the very best and the very worst in a person.
And the thing about South Africans, the resilience of South Africans is astounding every time. Look at Hermine, who's talking about her mother in Margate.
Right.
There's a difference, right? There's a difference in coming together, and there's safety and power in numbers to being an all right duos with a gun that's just looking
Someone to
for
shoot.
looking for trouble, looking for someone to shoot, behaving like you're in a movie.
Did you see all the news clips yesterday? I was watching Newsroom Africa just to get a different flavor on my news, and
Have they not come to the party?
they've
Hey,
been very good. I've got to say they've been really, really good. So I watched them last night, and they were showing people in what's that suburb called? Lamontville. Okay, in Lamontville, which is right next to Umlazi, and their cameramen were shining the light on these people who were walking past with their hands up because the police were obviously there, and they were arresting looters. Apparently, the police were also going through Alex last night. I know someone in Alex, and they were telling me that the police were going door to door in Alex, and they were recovering stolen goods last night, and they were arresting people. So you had these swathes of people walking past the camera. I'm amazed, by the way, at how many women took part in this looting. I thought that it would be mostly, sort of brave men, but there's a whole lot of women who were doing this too.
there's women and children.
Women and children, yeah. And I'm just, usually in violent and dangerous situations where there's a lot of risk, you'd expect the men to take the risk, but these women are fearless, fearless and stupid because they all get caught. But they also showed people who were driving in bakkies and trucks and taxis, and they were emptying all their stuff onto the road as they were going. So they were driving very slowly and throwing stuff out of the road, like packets of sweets and tea and cans of pilchards and flour, because they knew that the police roadblock was coming up and they were going to be arrested for it. Unbelievable.
But you know that here's the thing about looting, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's being swept up in a mob. That's what happens. So on Sunday and Monday and Tuesday, it was being swept up in the excitement, and the mob takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
And you've got to consider, we have got, and this is, for me, it was a classic case over the weekend and the early part of this week of, you know, how your parents used to say, you can't be bored, you must do something, because idle hands are the devil's playground.
Yeah. Yes.
Did we just lose? Did I lose everyone? Okay.
No. We're all still here. Yeah. Sorry. It almost sounds like a helicopter is landing something in the background.
Because I don't.
Yeah.
Is that? It's not here.
It
might
might
a helicopter landing in your background.
Let me see. Yes, my helicopter's arriving just to collect me, to take me down to KZN into the fighting fronts. No, it's the heater. I'm going to turn it off just now. It's my heater.
Okay. As long as it isn't military activity in your area. Just by the way, while we're talking about the military, Courtney says, are there any military in PE? We have a lack of numbers in KZN. Even the Gogos were looting, says Sibia. Yeah, Mduduz. Dogos is also adding here that the problem now is that the communities that allowed looting to happen need food from supermarkets. We still have our malls standing, but the situation's a little tricky now. See, the problem also is that the supply lines have been interrupted.
Indeed.
So anybody who knows how this works knows that there are big distribution centers and they supply all the various shops. But what happened in some of these places is that the distribution centers themselves were looted. So even if they managed to keep the shops from being raided, the distribution centers have been raided in some of those places, which means that people are now going to find themselves without food. So quite right. And Dogozo Tatenda says, one of my South African friends was telling me that these riots will get swept under the rug like Marikana, but I find it hard to believe with everything we witnessed. Oh no, Tatenda, I don't think that's going to happen at all. I think this is really a very big watershed moment in South Africa. It's also the last card that can be played by one of the factions inside the ANC, and it's very bad for the ANC overall. I think this is going to result in very tangible poll and societal results for the ANC, and they're all going to be negative. I mean, do you disagree with that, Pums? It's very bad news, this, for them. It's very bad news. It's bad news for the Zuma faction. I mean, what else have they got after this? If this doesn't work, and if it's over by next week, which we obviously all hope for the sake of peace and security and stability, if it's all over by next week, then they've shot their load. They've got nothing else to do, the Zuma faction. They've just got to quietly go into the Hlathini.
You know that chubby guy? There's that gif of the chubby guy from The Office. that's like shaking and chuckling.
Yes.
I wish I could do that. That's how I feel, like shaking and chuckling with my eyes closed. Because this is this what's happening now, unfortunately, is an indication of how broken our government has been over the past couple of years. This is a direct result. So a couple of months ago, we were listening to, well, I was listening to this commission of inquiry,
Yeah, it was
right?
just
And
you. I
and
always
and
say, thank God you're on the show, because otherwise we wouldn't have known anything about the Zondo Commission.
but there was a couple of months ago,
Mm.
maybe 2 months ago, the testimony about the State Security Agency
Yeah.
SSA
What a mess it
and
is. Yeah.
and how it's been gutted and how it's been looted. So it has no financial resources. It
Right.
has no it has no capacity in terms of workers. So the intelligence that is supposed to have kicked in on Thursday last week. So we were sitting here at 7 a.m. last week talking about the risk of instability and violence in KZN and how that is going to play out.
Right.
Yeah, there should have been somebody at the State Security
Well, I
Agency
mean, they employ
monitoring that when
they
the
employ
loot.
thousands of people, right? And they've got this huge big campus out here in Pretoria where they supposedly are monitoring everybody's phone calls, and they supposedly have their fingers on the pulse of exactly what's going on. Remember, Jacob Zuma set that up almost as his, because he was the intelligence man, and we heard all of the secrets that he had, and he knew everybody and knew what was going on before Cyril knew it. And
Dude,
look at them. They're a bunch
why
of
was I
they're a bunch
reading about
of
Ngizwe Mchunu? Why was I reading about Ngizwe Mchunu on WhatsApp and like
there are more.
Twitter, and
There's more
nobody's
information
bringing
there.
that guy in for some kind of questioning? Why was he allowed on Sunday
Exactly.
to be able to address, like, I was just like, it's bullshit,
And
man.
not just Kuno, but also Zandile Gomede, who's been pointed out as being one of the people who is talking to all the ward councillors and keeping those networks of patronage on their toes for Zuma, because she's worried about the effects of all of this on her future, because she's likely to go to prison and stay in prison. So there's a whole lot
Why
of
do,
stuff that's being said.
why is it that the journalists show
No, don't
up
talk.
before? Why are the journalists showing up
No.
at sites of looting before the police? Before, like, what the hell?
Well, if this whole situation doesn't give the executive branch of government the excuse that they need to completely reduce the number of people in the National Security Agency and to take apart our intelligence services and rebuild it from the ground up, then I don't know what excuse they need, because this was an intelligence failure of enormous proportions, not to mention the military failure, which should also make any minister of defense fireable instantly, because they haven't been very useful up to now either. And it took so long for the president even to make a call. By the way, what do you think of the fact? Sorry, Mbulelo. I just want to ask you this. What do you think of the fact that so many people are talking about Marikana, which you just mentioned a moment ago, as one of the reasons that Cyril Ramaphosa has been so remiss about making a decision with respect to the military or giving the police shoot to kill orders or any of that stuff? Do you think that that's part of it? I mean, what does that mean?
It means see the worry in my eye.
Is that you mean in Cyril's eye or in yours?
In
Because of Cyril.
in my eye,
Yeah.
what decision has Cyril made over the past 3 years almost?
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
In other words, he's not a decision maker. How could we
This
expect that he
is
would suddenly become one?
he is not afraid. He was not afraid of Marikana. That's not what is
Yeah.
stopping him from being. He just doesn't. He doesn't make decisions.
You know
Doesn't
who?
show up. Doesn't what?
So
He's been consistent. Consistent.
at least he's been consistent for once in his life. But you know who I was impressed with yesterday was Mangosuthu Buthelezi, because he pitched up in Umlazi, and he's 95 or whatever now. That old man pitched up to try and tell community leaders to calm everything down, to make sure that people stopped, looting and creating consternation, because he said people are going to starve. I mean, there's this very old man who's taking up leadership and actually going to the places and doing this instead of sitting back and waiting for someone else to make the decisions so he can't get the blame if it's the wrong decision. You know, that I was impressed with, and that was happening yesterday evening. I saw a couple of people commenting and taking pictures on social media. Now, I don't think that was grandstanding in any way, because what has he got to gain from that, really? But I like that there are some people who really are coming to the fore and standing up. I mentioned the taxi bosses. I mentioned ordinary community members. I mentioned people in suburbs who are just looking after their own friends, family, and neighbors. And Mangosuthu Buthelezi. And there are community groups in the Eastern Cape, in really poor areas, who are putting out these notices to all of their people. I saw even in Diepsloot here in Johannesburg that there are Diepsloot residents associations who are saying, we will go from house to house and we will find you if you loot, and we will take back all that stuff and we will hand you over to the police. You know, there are good people in so many neighborhoods in this country, and it's so nice to see them coming to the fore instead of just the bad people, or that kind of apathetic, oh, well, we'll just sit and wait for the government to save us attitude, which is in this country a bit of a waste of time because they're not coming to save you. I just want to go back to the messages quickly. Sharon says, we haven't seen any military in Glenwood and Durban. Every shopping center was destroyed in our neighborhood.
Sure.
Sorry, Sharon. There's no food. We stand in long lines just waiting for bread and milk. It is very, very scary. It's crazy, are her words, exactly. Color says, just booked my vax last night when registrations opened for our age group. 36,000 people registered in the first 30 minutes. It's up to our generation to let sanity prevail. I think that's a good point. Although I'm not in any hurry as you are to get the vaccine. Errol says, at least we're not as bad as Afghanistan. Well, I don't know. Errol, some people would say, at least, you know, in Afghanistan, it's declared, you know, a war. Yeah, it's like a civil war. The military isn't PE, says Carol. They were stationed at our shopping centers yesterday. And Graham makes, again, an obvious but a very good point, which we need to make over and over again. Graham says, blaming all black people for looting is like blaming all white people for apartheid. Not all black people are looters. You know, you Pumi was saying that there are people being shot just because they're black and they're walking around in some neighborhoods. Even if all the looters happen to be black people, the race is not the most important thing here. And again, on the other side of the argument, we see multiracial groups who are protecting neighborhoods, which makes me happy. Courtney says, this cannot be swept under the rug. Too much devastation everywhere. Communities are losing faith in our leaders and they're taking the law into their own hands. Well, I hate to say it, Pums, but you've been prescient in another way, because you've said for the longest time it is up to us. And if you ever needed a message from the heavens to prove that it is up to you, this situation in KZN, which caught everyone off guard, even those people who knew and listened to the Burning Platform last week, it caught them off guard, but you can rely on the people closest to you. And it is at the lowest level. It's at your community level that you can make a difference. And my God, has that been proven this week, right? Unreal. Just throw this in from a psychological point of view. This is beyond the pigment of our skin. This comes down to humans standing together for the livelihoods of their being as a whole. That's absolutely right. Vince says, why does Pumi giggle before answering anything? Do you want to answer that? I think she's just, she doesn't giggle before everything, Vince. At the beginning of COVID, I stocked up on water, etc. Not so much now, however, there wasn't the writing on the wall. We'd like to thank all the KZN cleanup initiatives that are going on. And Alvain saying, intelligence, what intelligence? Since 1994, Ray-Ban wearing, looking so important GTI blue light driving club for idiots. Morning, Gareth and company. Great show as per usual. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And Katu Cat is saying, is Joburg open? Can we travel there? Yeah, you can.
No, don't come. No.
From where?
And don't come.
Where?
From Katu in the northern. That's where Cat is. Don't
come. We don't want you. Since you don't want us, we don't want you. Since we're locked in here, don't come. Hi. Ningas.
And Kat also just points out that the reason Pumi giggles is because it's her Zuma impersonation. I love that. All right, it is past. Let's look at a couple of headlines. You want me to tell you what's going on in the latest headlines? 129,000 jobs are now at risk because of riots and looting, says eThekwini's Kaunda. Let me tell you that story. It comes from EWN. This is very scary. You know, we already have such a problem in South Africa when it comes to unemployment. Everybody knows this. We've talked about it a million times. Mxolisi Kaunda, who's the mayor of eThekwini, said that the impact is going to be very severe. Many families are expected to lose their livelihoods because of what's been happening. So 129,000 is the number that he's thrown in there. The municipality is still counting the cost of the damage. It's estimated to be at 15 billion rand. And the mayor is visiting Phoenix at the moment, one of the areas that loot has hit businesses the hardest, cleaning out shops, malls, and shopping centers. There were major concerns that the unemployment rate would increase further in this area. There's now more than 1 billion rand in loss of stock by businesses, more than 15 billion in damages to property, equipment, and infrastructure. 55,000 informal traders have been affected. You know, again, as if life couldn't be more unfair. The people who are really slogging to keep things going and who are feeding small communities of poor people are going to be hit even harder. So once more, we can talk about shops not having anything on the shelves. And Bulelo, you went to the shop. You were joking just yesterday about the Woolworths, but it turns out you don't have anything in your Woolworths either.
Literally all the bread sold, 20% of the shelves were full now. It may be panic buying, and some of the ladies said, yes, they are getting stock, but yeah, people are panic buying. But I just want to say something that worries me, although it doesn't worry me because I expect it when you have so many people in government. 90% of people are incompetent generally. So what happened for me is that's really interesting is I haven't heard anybody talking about what are we going to do after this? Like, there's a reason why big companies work is certain people should be dealing with the situation, but you should also be telling your people what is going to happen afterwards. There's people with that job. Everyone's caught up in what's going on there. And I understand that it's awful, but there should be people dealing with that if we were organized. And there should be, what are we going to do after this? Because the world is going to go on for people in KZN after this. What are we going to do? Tell us that part as well. It's so important.
On that note, in Durban, there's a big cleanup operation happening right now under the watchful eye of police and supported by Santaco. Cleaners from the Durban Solid Waste Company have begun the arduous task of cleaning up a city that was left looking like a scene from a post-apocalyptic movie. This is a report this morning from IOL. The cleaning teams from Durban Solid Waste collected and bagged countless items that included plastic paper boxes and rubbish left behind by looters. By late afternoon, the streets of the city center that had been paved with discarded loot had begun to look like its former self. So there is some good news. Some people are starting to take control back and clean up what has been messed up. And the looters were driven out by police and members of the SANDF on Wednesday from the CBD. Soldiers and police were also deployed to Queen Nandi Drive after a visit by Premier Sihle Zikalala, who went to see for himself what had happened. I also
Crawling out of whatever hole he's been hiding in.
Yeah, exactly. But at least he was there, right? I mean, where's Silili?
No.
Where's
No.
Silili?
No.
Where's Cyril?
Yesterday,
Yesterday,
now that people have, like, sanity has somewhat returned to people, the calm down after the high, and people are starting to clean up, communities are standing up and coming together. Yesterday, we have a whole array of politicians out on the ground, like waving like celebrities. What the fuck?
Exactly.
No, we're not impressed. We're not buying into their bullshit. Sihle Zikalala showing up after the fact.
Fair enough. But Pumi, yesterday,
Tweeting.
The president said nothing to us right now. I understand he's probably in meetings and things, but his most important job is to address the people. And he did talk to us on Sunday and on Monday. But his spokesperson or the minister in the presidency had to come out and say we're deploying SANDF. You know, that's the president's thing.
Wait, hold up.
Where is he?
Let's have a small moment about Monday nights, like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Which A was late.
Mm-hmm.
He was an hour and a half late. After starting out an hour and a half, because he was supposed to go on at 7, eventually went on at 8:30, I think.
I think it was always meant to be 8, but he was half an hour at least, and maybe longer. Okay.
And then Like what? You show up with your like nicely tied up suit, like
Mhm.
twang, your half-assed one sentence in Zulu and one sentence in Sotho. This is not the time to be polished, and this is the time I would
Yeah.
have very much liked to see Cyril come in there with his shirt rolled up, with his sleeves rolled up, with a little bit of anger in his voice, with a little bit of passion, with a little bit of feeling for something. You know, we're all tired. We're all tired. We're all scared. We're all hungry. We're all of these various things. But
Yeah.
it's not for the leader. It's not for the leader to show up reflecting how we feel. He is supposed to show up and give us confidence.
Right.
He's supposed to show up and give us confidence that there is somebody at the wheel. Somebody is working 24 hours a day. He is not working in that red tie, in that suit. Come on.
Especially those people who are in the thick of it. I think you're right. They would have taken more comfort from the fact that he was angry than they would have from the fact that he's trying to empathize with them. Who needs that right now?
No.
You know, if you've been hearing gunshots all night and you haven't slept for 3 nights, the last thing you want to hear is a president who's like, "Oh, well, I know how you feel, but blah blah blah." And it was mostly platitudes, but I agree with you. So again, politicians, Bulelo, Pumi, both of you said a million times how you feel about politicians. So have I. Again, they come up wanting, and we will address this a little bit more in the Burning Platform. Later on, we've got 2 very fiery people on the Burning Platform this morning: Leeto Nthoba, who never holds back, and Jonathan Witt, who was on a Twitter. You know, when you do a Twitter stream and you kind of
Thread.
yeah, a thread. That's what it is. Sorry, that's the word. He was on a rant with his Twitter thread, and I thought it would be interesting to have him on the show. I think yesterday or the day before. So we've arranged that.
Oh God, now I have to go find the thread.
Maak and Des both agreeing with you, Pumi. His speech did not inspire a whole lot of confidence. Remember when Cyril wore an army uniform at the start of lockdown? Now we're in a real war. Nada. Yeah. Cyril sounded bored. These are the comments that are coming through from people now. Unfortunately, your president showed how he disrespects your nation, says Raz. The suit is an important point. They don't get their hands dirty. And Bulelo, you hate that suit because it fits badly.
Who's his tailor? It's unbelievable.
It's not tailored, off the rack.
But we can still talk about, okay, why he doesn't have a tailor. And from the previous ones, guys were telling me, oh, it's disaster.
There is
Disaster.
The best meme to come out of all of this, and there's not a lot to laugh at right now because it is very serious, but one of the best memes is all the looters and then Cyril's in the front with his new iPad in a box.
Oh my gosh.
That was funny.
And that's the other thing. In the midst of it all, South African humor is undeterred. And it's just
Phenomenal.
the humor is really, it's world class. People are, and it's a coping mechanism that we have as South Africans. The giggling.
Kiabetso says, I know it won't help the small uninsured companies, but it was good to hear that Sasria has said it will sufficiently capitalize to return and settle unrest claims. That's very good news because, of course, if you have insurance, you're going to be, calling up your insurance company right now, and they need to be able to deliver because this is when you need insurance companies more than ever. Anyway, 1 or 2 more headlines quickly. So I've told you about the cleanup that's been happening in Durban, but there is another point of view on all of this. A lot of people are calling for a state of emergency. The beer industry has added its voice to that of Agri-SA and the Consumer Goods Council. The Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry also called for a state of emergency in KwaZulu-Natal. Violent unrest and looting have rocked the province following the imprisonment of former President Jacob Zuma, and 72 people have now died in the unrest. 1,200 and something have been arrested. Really, is that all that the police managed to arrest out of those thousands of looters? Again, please, can Becky Taylor just try and be as competent as possible? If I were the Minister of Police and my police only arrested 1,200 people out of the thousands and thousands of people we saw doing crazy stuff, and most of them are on camera, for heaven's sake, I'd say you guys are not doing your job. Am I being unfair?
Was he? Where was Baby
Where was he?
on Friday, on Saturday, on
was here at
Sunday,
Mamelodi,
on
yeah.
Monday?
Yesterday,
Yeah.
Mamelodi. I mean, really, is that where you need to be?
Today,
You know why?
it's
You know why he went
7
there?
days later.
You know why he
7
went-
days later today.
So he was in Mamelodi because the police managed to stop the looters halfway through the destruction of a shopping center. So he was there to show that they managed to do half a job. In my opinion, that's what it does. That's what it looks like anyway. So there's lots of other good stuff that isn't all bad news to talk about this morning, but I do think lots and lots of people today are looking for answers, and I hope we'll be able to find them for you. We'll certainly talk a little bit later about all the political implications of this, how it's making people in South African society and in the economy behave, and we'll have a couple of interesting analyses from Leeto, Jonathan, and Pumi a bit later in the show. So we'll get into all of that. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that, the video of the Zuma girls saying, hi guys, thanks for supporting our father. And Mbulelo, I wanted to ask you about something. I saw, a group on WhatsApp sharing stuff yesterday about old boys from KZN and Hilton who were part of the looting parties.
Mm-hmm.
These are rich kids, spoilt rich kids who had the best possible education, who were filmed being involved in the looting, actually stealing stuff, and then also afterwards making up the most bullshit excuses you've ever heard about why they were involved. And these are children whose parents are clearly very connected. They're children who knew where to be at what time in order to be part of the looting party and were stealing stuff, even though they have all the money in the world. It kind of disproves, again, the idea that so many people have that you can blame poverty for this when you see people like that being part of the stealing. But also, like, is there an elite that's so out of touch that they join in this because it's almost like an entertainment exercise? And what do we make of people who have had all of the privilege and who've had all the opportunity and still join in this kind of behavior? What do we make of that kind of thing?
Scum is scum.
Yeah.
I don't care how much money you've got. Scum is scum, you know. And when you see that, and also I think it's important to know, just going to those types of schools, you can't wash the scum away. You might, and listen, you might come from a certain kind of background. Going to Hilton doesn't change that. By 7 years old, you are who you are as a person.
Right.
We know this now. So if you're scum by 7, you're scum. Scum is scum. There's
more. That's exactly what I was thinking, and that you and I agree on this topic is, I think, important, because we've said again for many years now that if you are a horrible person and poor, you can be a horrible person and rich. If you're a good person and poor, you'll be a good person and rich. The money actually has very little to do with it.
In fact, money doesn't change people. It makes them more of who they are. So if you are horrible poor, you are going to be Adolf Hitler rich. You're going to be the worst kind.
Here's an interesting question that's been asked here. Pums, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, and I want to say, guys, looting is also a mob psychology that takes over people. So it becomes like this fun, exciting, joyous thing everybody is doing. It's crazy. And there was somebody earlier talking about the psychology of stuff. It is crazy, the psyche that takes over a group of people in these environments. So you find yourself here. It's like when we were kids and when we were stealing peaches, right? Just because this house has a peach tree and they look so good, you're not stealing those peaches because you're hungry or you need peaches. But if you're a group of 10 kids and there's those peaches and one of you says, let's get the peaches, like you're all going for the peaches, you're all crazy in that moment.
No.
That's what looting is also like. It's also just a psychology of a mob going crazy.
That's why I'm terrified of mobs, because they always make bad decisions. There's never been a mob in history that made the right decision, right? Not one.
So I had a really interesting conversation with my mom yesterday. So she worked in war zones for about, let's say, 20 years, a little bit more, but anyway, 20 years. And so my mom's deeply traditional as a Pedi person, but what she can't stand is when there's systems and there's a tribal approach where there are certain people viewed as special. And she had a huge fallout with a guy some people may remember him, called Kofi Annan, about this whole thing, because he was massively, like a serious blowout with him. And she's really worried about that, and has been for a long time in South Africa, which is why she doesn't actually work with South African government, is that we employ a tribal model where there's, like, for lack of a better term, Western economy, and which is why we are where we are, where people feel, because if you apply, I'm just going to use Xhosa, I don't know other traditions. If you apply a Xhosa narrative to what you might call corruption, you're going to get yourself in trouble, because there's actually at the top of the tree, there is, I am entitled to it. It would almost be doing wrong if I don't take it as the leader. I deserve it. And my mom's always been really worried about this. And she says she's seen this before. What we're seeing now in this moment, she had huge struggles across the continent trying to get people to get out of the tribal thinking.
You're opening a can of worms here. You're going to get enormous amounts of heat from both sides now. You're going to get Xhosa people saying that's bullshit. And you're going to get lots of people saying, are you saying all Xhosas are criminals? And then you're going to get people going, yeah, that's what I believe, because I hate Xhosa people. You know?
Yeah, which, listen, this is why it's so important, is everybody's entitled to be upset. I've always said this. What you're not entitled to be is to be right. Be as upset as you want. Hate what I say. You can hate me. I don't care. What's true? And then we can get to it. And listen, we're talking about somebody with massive experience here.
I think that's a really interesting subject. I don't want to glibly pass on and move on to other things, but there are a couple of people who are talking here about something I think many of us are interested in. What is going on with our deputy president, and why is he still in Russia? DK asking that. And then, some people trying to answer that question. Mabuza will be next president, yes, says Paul. That would be a frightening thought. But that's how it works right now. Am I right?
I feel like Didi is drinking water and staying dehydrated, minding his business and his skin. He's just like, I think he's hoping to stay out of it long enough to not be pulled into any one of the factions.
Is that because he has
come out on the other side?
Because he has loyalties to both, kind of like what
because
he did.
He's duplicitous.
Yeah, and because at Nasrec he sold out to the one side, but he actually has lots of friends on the other side. He made a bet there, and he's maybe nervous to make another bet. You think that's what's going on?
I think he's quietly amassing money and people in places of influence, because one of the things that the deputy president of the party does is deployment
and money.
And I think he is gearing up to coming out on the other side, aligned to his self-interest, so he can go into 2022, if they survive that long, into the elective conference as some kind of, listen, I never took sides. I can come in here and we can fix this. We can all work together and fix this. I'm the guy that wasn't there in the crazy. I wasn't there in the crazy.
Interesting analysis. Do you think it'll work for him though?
It might.
And the Kremlin just got an upgrade, by the way. I think they were upgrading last year, so he's probably just hanging out. I mean, if you've been to Moscow, it is sensational. So, I mean, why wouldn't you want to be there drinking your imported Italian water and saying "Ach, Shem," and from there to all of us who are scared?
Let us not discount the fact that there is no leader taking charge, taking control at the ANC at the moment. They just, everybody, and they're looking for leadership. They're looking for somebody that's going to say, okay, guys, let's do this. Let's go here. Let's move in this way. I think that's what DT is busy doing. He's consolidating power.
That's an interesting take on this. I haven't heard that theory. I like it. It sounds about right to me. Mark Holman says, I'm in KZN. I've missed the show for the last 3 days. I've been stuck on a 72-hour diet of news and WhatsApp updates. It'll drive you insane. Good to be back on Cliff Central for some refreshing perspectives. Hey, it's all we're good for. But if we can help, good. That's what we're here to do. Man. Didi Mabuza will probably be hailed as the new Jesus and the savior of the ANC. There's Paul kind of agreeing with you, Pumi. And Mduduzi saying, is Mabuza a part of the Zuma faction? Well, he played both sides, remember. Nobody knew whose side he was on at Nasrec until he finally cast his ballot and organized his people. But Mpumalanga, it seems, has also been hit by some of this violence. There was quite a lot of it in Nelspruit, in Bushbuck Ridge. So, yeah, I mean, people are asking questions about him, and he's hiding out in Russia. So I think we should at very least not have to pay for his salary while he's not being deputy president. Anyway,
Gebetsu says there are no leaders anyway. Who do we vote for? Gebetsu, stand up, Baba. Is it a girl? Is it a girl or a boy? I'm not sure. I can't see.
Lady. It's a lady, yeah.
Gebetsu, we are our own heroes. We, people who are competent, people who have an interest in wanting to see this country become better, be part of a structure. Start something. Something. Galvanize people around you. You can be that leader. You don't have to wait for somebody else to vote for. Be the person that people can vote for.
Just quickly, as an aside, because we're going to go into more politics in a little while if you haven't had your fill yet. But Pumi, how is everything going with parenting during a time like this? Because you referred to something which I think many parents aren't sure how to deal with. You know, you've got your kids at home. You've got you're watching the news, so they can see you're anxious. They probably have some inkling that something serious is going down, and it's not just COVID. And COVID has already traumatized a lot of kids, even if it's softly and subconsciously. How do you parent your kids through something like this, where they're exposed to news and they're exposed to your anxiety as a parent?
Yeah, I have been thinking a lot about that this week because I so much of what's happened this week has been a trigger for those of us who grew up in the townships in the 80s.
Yeah.
This is like round 2 on steroids, right? We were always in lockdowns. There were police and military presence everywhere. We did not have TikTok, and Twitter, and all social media and 24-hour news because there was also a very big kind of ban on news.
With a blackout, yeah.
And so our parents had a little bit of a better task in kind of trying to explain what everything is happening to us. And I've been thinking about how do I keep my child informed without, and this is the hard part, without imposing on him my fears and anxieties. So without it becoming you can't trust these people in the townships. You can't trust the police. You can't trust, how do you have a conversation that's kind of neutral? We had a conversation last week, Gareth and I, and he was one of the people that said to me, there's going to be rioting, mommy. There's going to be rioting. And he's also the person who's showing me all of the comparisons that are on TikTok of like the purge, videos of the purge, cut against videos of KZN and the looting and all of that stuff. So you kind of have to
you can't hide him from this stuff. You can't protect him.
And then you have to have hard conversations. And this is our opportunity, I think, to have the conversations that are really tough, really hard about how we got here, why we are here, and what inequality can do to humanity. And how, we all have to, what does Barak say? Appeal to the angels of our better nature. This is the moment. So that you can't say to your kids now, I don't know, I'm scared. You're still the parents. So you don't be like Cyril. Don't be like Cyril to your kids.
Yeah.
Be honest, be truthful. And also, we're lucky because our kids have actually been raised to know how to articulate their feelings and their fears. So you must also allow them the space to vent, allow them the space to tell you what they're thinking, how they're feeling, how they, to deal with it.
Can we also stop calling the people in government leaders, because they're really not leaders.
Yes.
Shezi makes the point here. This entire administration needs to be investigated. I've never seen the ANC this divided. They've been dancing around, showing no leadership, and are surprised now that things are the way they are. That's such a good point, because you wouldn't have got a decision out of any of the cabinet ministers over anything. I mean, part of the reason that we never get anything done in South Africa, and when we do get something done, it's the wrong thing, is because we have the wrong people making the decisions. And they can't make decisions half the time. They're just paralyzed in fear that they're going to get it wrong, or there's some nonsense that they've been told by someone else. There's secrecy and there's factionalism and all of this stuff. That's not how leaders behave. Leaders make decisions, tough decisions. Like you just said, you have to as a parent in your family. And that's what made me think of it. Maybe Jermaine as well. Like these are not leaders.
No, in psychology, before you're going to deliver something, there's something called priming. You prime people psychologically to deliver a message, to almost make it lean your way. We've been primed as South Africans to almost think that, oh my God, if the ANC went away, there'd be a civil war. Now we're seeing that there wouldn't, because people are now, we're seeing now, Uguti, actually, Yazin, we wouldn't care about you. Just deliver water to my house and keep my women and children safe. And let's keep this thing rolling. That's what South Africans are showing you they care about in the worst time.
So many communities in this country, we're going to be speaking to Leeto just now, but I mean, where he lives, they haven't had leadership. They haven't been relying on politicians for the longest time. If the community didn't do things for themselves, nothing happened. So they know what anarchy looks like in any case. There's so many parts of this country that feel the same way. So what are we afraid of here? These are not people who deserve our respect. That's the point. Anyway, we'll get to all of that and more in a moment. It is 7:00, cliffcentral.com. It's been a heavy morning, so I'm sorry about that. But I thought what Pumi just said now about being a parent in times like these is very powerful stuff. So thank you, Pums. Glad we got to at least cover that. And the very funny footage that I was watching on Newsroom Africa last night of looters throwing their stuff out of the car so that they don't get arrested at the police roadblock 500 meters down the road. I mean, that kind of thing that's so South African. So there's lots to talk about in the Burning Platform. That's coming up next. Stick around. It's brought to you by Nando's. This is cliffcentral.com. Pumi and Budlelo and I, and then joined in a moment or two by Leeto and by Jonathan Witt. All of that and more on the way.
This week on Auto Central.
It's basically a normal 330i that was built in Germany with 330iS edition stickers, some M Sport body kit, styling goodies, beautiful wheels, and a blackout shadow line trim kit. And that's actually pretty much where the similarities to the old car ends.
Catch Auto Central, SA's #1 motoring podcast, every Monday at 9 a.m.
After the year you've had, we know all you want is a great economic quarter. Ijabuphilo ka knife and fork with a Nando's quarter chicken and any single side for only 49 Rand. Nando's. Fire it up.
And thankfully, many restaurants have reopened in the country. But just hearing the name of Nando's again has made me think we've got to keep supporting our restaurants and our small businesses in this country more than ever now, because those are the people that are not only going to feed us, but they're the people who are struggling themselves to keep all of their staff, to keep their businesses operating. And that's before any of this craziness happened this week. That was just normal lockdown nonsense. So this morning, the Burning Platform, as always, brought to you by Nando's. And today we get to talk and to debate and to discuss all of the issues in a very, very, a very different South Africa to the one that we were talking about in most of the Burning Platforms for the last year. I've got two of our best contributors over the past while to join us this morning. We're going to be joined by Leeto and Nthoba. We, of course, have Umi Masiko here as well. And we've got Dr. Jonathan Witt. So welcome, guys. There's a lot to talk about this week. I'm not sure where to begin, but let's start at the nexus of all of this. Let's start with Jacob Zuma and the fact that it was precipitated by him. Do you guys all believe, as an opening salvo, do you believe that what has precipitated itself in South African society has been orchestrated by the Zuma faction? Do you think all of this is actually an organized thing, or do you think this is pure mob chaos like Fumi was talking about earlier, where people just get swept up and they do stupid and bad things because that's what they think they can get away with? Where do we begin? Leeto and Nthoba, you can start us off this morning.
Okay, morning, Gareth. Morning, guys.
Morning.
So my views on this are very different, right? So there is a Zuma hand working in and amongst all of this, right? And I think it's very important to notice that there are two sides to this whole looting and protesting thing. It's the one disorganized with no ideology side, where people are just running into the nearest mall and taking what they can. And then on the other side, there's a much more organized and more nefarious targeting of crucial infrastructure to our economy and also our country. And so we must recognize the difference between the two. So where you see there's the nefarious Zuma organizing, right, is that how does one open a factory? Like, how do you get to the point at which you open the first gate and then you open to the loading docks of that factory? It seems like there are people who are indeed opening these factories so that people can come in, and opening the shops that people can come in, right? But then on the other side is, notice that whenever you see the looting, it's always in a residential area that's near a mall or shopping complex. But whenever there's that Checkers Hyper that was burning, I think in Pietermaritzburg, there was nobody to loot that place. So then it was opened and then burned. And so you see that if there are no people to loot, then you just go in there and burn it and just waste whatever resources are inside of that place. And then secondly, the closing of the N3 with the sort of hijacked trucks, and then the intimidating of truck drivers, also like looting that goes towards the harbor, trying to go take cars, and all of that seems to be more organized towards the sort of like casting doubt into the capabilities of the country to import and logistically move goods, right? And then the last part is the one where you see there's an effort to also overload the sort of medical side of things. So when the people broke into the blood service, people laughed it off on Twitter to go like, oh yeah, this is a funny thing. But breaking into the blood service of South Africa is very crucial in trying to break down the way in which our health services work, right? Because the blood service has always been constrained in South Africa. And if somebody thinks about it and knows it very well, you understand that if you just go in, break the fridges, or just unplug the fridges, the blood then turns bad and then you can't use it. And so when you do all of these things, you are then trying to sabotage the country. And so if you think about the Zuma family,
you can even throw that Afrox plant, which was set on fire. You can throw that into that mix too, because that's clearly, it's not something that ordinary people can use. But without the oxygen that they produce there are going to be lots and lots of people who are suffering with COVID and other things right now who can't get their oxygen. So that makes an interesting point.
So here's the crucial part, right? Remember that Jacob Zuma and his family are deeply obsessed with the State Security Agency and its apparatus, right? Jacob Zuma in and of himself was just like obsessed with it. Even when he was president, even before that, he would just go and sit at the State Security Agency and try to find out as much as he can.
Yeah.
Duduzane, we found out through the commission, actually got one of these free ride jobs at the State Security Agency. And so if you're thinking about it, they would understand the ways in which to try and sabotage South Africa, because you're not going to sabotage South Africa and its economy or how it works, or even get the attention of anyone if you're looting in Welkom or in Bloemfontein or Bultfontein. And so when you're thinking about that, there are two very important places in South Africa to cause this disruption. It is in KZN and in Gauteng. If those two places are in turmoil, our economy then is in very, very big doubt.
Yeah. What do you say to Leeto's points to me, and then I'll bring Jonathan into this. Do you think he makes a valid point about infrastructure and some kind of coordination by these nefarious forces? And also, what's going to happen to them?
Well, we have been talking about that. You know, we've been talking about what does this all mean? I mean, the N3, the burning of trucks and intimidating truck drivers has been going on for over a year. It's been going on for a long time, and nothing has been done about it. It's kind of alludes to what I was talking to earlier about the fact that the State Security Agency is broken. But what we're seeing an overall breakdown of government. The police are unable to do anything. The army is unable to, the intelligence, nothing is working. Nothing is working in South Africa at the moment. And this is what we're seeing, the anger of people spilling over into that. And I've seen WhatsApps of various factions kind of talking about, we're targeting this, we're targeting that, who is with us, the various wards. You talk about, the branches in on the ground in the KZN area, so the branch leaders. And remember that those guys are like networks of patronage right now.
Yeah,
deeply
correct.
Entrenched networks of patronage. So there is a coordination, but I don't think it's as well thought out or thought through as Leeto may see it. Leeto, I think that there is a bit of a coordination, but I don't think it's as well thought out as that.
Well, Jonathan, you've had some interesting things to say on Twitter about this. How do you see this from the analysis that you've been doing?
Morning. I mostly agree with Pumi there. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And if you're going to turn around and say, well, this is all coordinated, we need a bit more evidence than that. I'm sorry, but as Pumi says, trucks have been attacked on the N3 for a long time now. Nobody cared. Attacked and burnt. The violence rises and falls on occasion. There was a story about communication towers having been attacked. With due respect, communication towers get attacked all the time because they have batteries and generators and things like that. Perhaps it's a bit worse than it is currently, than it has been. But the truth is I think that we need to look at two realities here. And part of what Leeto is saying is that there's random sort of looting and crowds and mobs rioting. And then there are people who will take the opportunities. And you're going to see that in the next weeks and months. There are going to be political actors who are going to take their opportunities. You saw Julius Malema trying to take his opportunity and screwing it up royally. And everyone is going to try and make the situation the best for them. Yes, are there? Sorry, yes.
No. Just finish your sentence on that one. Are there?
So there are, are there people who are engaging in some sort of coordinated planning? Sure, most likely, and that will get more and more as it happens. You can see communities engaging in organized planning to stop this.
Yes. Now, the question that you've just made me think of, you said Julius has screwed up his opportunity royally. I, again, can't help feeling sorry for him. He's always been envious of having a struggle, and now this was his chance, and he fucked this up too. I got to ask you all, Duduzane Zuma appears to me to be where before we weren't really sure of the measure of the man because he's just this good-looking guy. He's popular with a lot of teenage girls, and his father is a very well-known and very capable political actor. Certainly, he's the kind of guy who could stir up a crowd if he needed to, even if he's in prison and the crowd can't hear him. But Duduzane Zuma has revealed himself to be a complete amateur in all of this.
Sure.
If you've seen the videos that he's been putting out, it's like he's trying to pretend to be an actor who's a politician. It's very bad. The veneer is so thin. Do any of you disagree? Because if anyone has blown their opportunity, it's Duduzane Zuma in all of this. I mean, he was hoping for a political career. He's going to run, he's going to run up against the machinery of the ANC in the next elective conference. I mean, is there anyone who's taking him seriously here?
The problem with Duduzane is he bought into the narrative that he built around his troll farm, right? The people who were backing him up and saying, this guy's going to be the new youth league president. He's going to do all of these things. So he thought the internal weakness that's inside the ANC and the ANC Youth League is the weakness that is generally in South Africa. And so he thinks you can get by with like nice English and your good looks and flashing a smile, and then saying things that are totally idiotic, right? And so what we're seeing, and I'm glad he's doing it, because in South Africa, people are starting to think that their politics and the politics of the ANC are some kind of a monarchy where you can inherit your father's popularity, or it can rub off on you. If somebody like gives you 10,000 rand, you're somehow a politician. And now we're starting to see those lines clearly defined. Stay in your lane. You should have stayed in your private school or lived in Dubai, wherever the hell you were. Stay there, because South Africans are more discerning of stupidity now. We are starting to really, really decide who is dumb and should stay out of our way and who is smart enough to lead us. And I think that's a good place where we are, like, as South Africans, in trying to pick out who should be in front of us.
It's amazing how much of the stuff gets pushed to the side. And I will give you a chance, Pumi and Jonathan, to respond to Leeto's comments about Duduzane. But it's amazing how people suddenly reprioritize and recalibrate the things that they thought were important a couple of months ago. The things that, it's amazing how, like, Corona has just been pushed off to the side as well. Like, that was never as big an issue as everybody made it to be. I mean, you've been going on about that, Jonathan, fearlessly on Twitter since the beginning, and I've got to give you points for consistency. But now suddenly, when your neighborhood is being assaulted by mobs of people, and when your shops are being looted and there's a chance that you won't have food for the rest of the week, suddenly people's priorities come into stark focus, and they leave behind a whole lot of political bullshit and baggage. And a lot of the things that we thought were so important and we used to discuss here on the Burning Platform are suddenly not big issues. Do you agree?
Well, how's about that racism billboard, Gareth? Racism is not the problem. Didn't that just get proven 100% correct? I mean, you should have Gabriel Krause on here so everyone can just applaud him for about 10 minutes. We can give him a standing ovation.
Yeah, we had him on to talk about precisely that just 2 weeks ago. And
I know.
And I think he's thrilled. He's thrilled at how it's been proven right. But yes, I mean, there are other things too that we've looked at. I mentioned COVID and you chuckled. I mean, do you think that that's also been put on the back burner? It turns out lots of people don't care about COVID if there's a chance to grab some free stuff.
Yeah, look, it seems to me that, unfortunately, I'd like to believe Leeto's view that everyone's kind of focused on the right things now and they want the wrong people to get out of the way and all of that. But a lot of people seem to be lemmings, and they do follow the sort of order of the day, whatever it happens to be. And so this week it's looting and rioting across the country. If we manage to get on top of this, next week it'll be out of the news. It'll be when that happened. And then it'll be onto the political discussions around that, and people will be thinking about that. I really think what's important in this whole thing is seeing the bigger picture. That was what my Twitter thread was about, was how did we get here? How did we arrive in 2021 with the point that a man goes to jail, it causes an ignition of these riots. Not is the cause of the riots, in my opinion, but it does cause a spark, which enables those riots to happen. But then at the same time, you lose complete law and order. You have no control over those riots in multiple areas across the country, which you can't blame on tribalism, as, in my opinion, as Helen Ziller sort of mentioned before the riots happened, just based on where this has taken place. And how did we get here after 20 years of really bad decision making on the part of pretty much everyone, from the voters to the ANC?
So I wanted, when I left the show last week, and it was sparked by a comment that came through from one of the listeners. I spent a little bit of time kind of thinking what I wanted to talk about this week is we spoke about a lack of leadership across the board last week. And I wanted to talk about the other political parties and why they have failed to step into the leadership gap as well. And, we talk about how this whole thing has backfired on Julius in the worst way. I think I've said it on the show before that I think the EFF has plateaued because they are one trick pony and they have nothing else to offer us. Their biggest thing for a very long time was get rid of Jacob Zuma. And what's come out on social media platforms across the board is Julius saying, we need a political solution to a political problem. Contrasted with videos of him saying that old man will be a pensioner in jail. And that's the credibility that they have lost, and we often speak about why is our biggest opposition party, the DA, not able to transcend, not able to capitalize on all of these situations. Why is it that they're unable to just crack the code and get people on their side? Jonathan, what's up?
No, I mean, I can give you part of that answer, and part of the answer is part of the people that are responsible for that, and that is the corporate media. The corporate media are responsible. How many people know that John Steenhuisen was on the ground pretty much the next day and has been every day since? He was the first political leader on the ground. Frankly, there is leadership. John Steenhuisen has shown excellent leadership. He posted a statement yesterday which gave good examples of what should be done. The new Zulu King, who is a very young man with very little experience, Mr. Zulu, if I'm not mistaken, he gave a statement which was far superior to anything Cyril has done. The reality is we do have leadership in this country, but we also have a grouping of people, not only politicians, but corporate media, who have an agenda here. So News 24 has been tweeting out from their account, #Zuma riots, the entire way through this, completely oblivious to the fact this has nothing to do with Zuma overall as a major issue. And they are obsessed with doing that. Why? Because as has been their intent since the beginning, Cyril must be the god, i.e. Cyril is majestic, according to Adrian Basson, and Zuma and his faction must be the enemy. And if you can create those two sides, you can keep the ANC in power forever, because you've got one bad side and one good side, and you can sell that to the community. And that's exactly what they do. And so does 702, and so does Power FM, and so does the Mail and Guardian, and I can go on. We have no independent media in this country speaking to people and telling people the truth. And the one good thing that's come out of this is people seeing that those people do nothing for them. Nothing. The only people who will save them when the purge comes for them is themselves and their communities.
Gareth, if you remember, I think it was a few months ago, I said this, that South Africa is waking up to realize that it's a small town. So everyone in small towns has already been through all of this. And so all of you have just woken up in the small town of Beltfontein today. And you think, you're grappling with issues we already grappled with. A month ago, I think it was a month ago, the ANC faction in our area wanted to rise up against the mayor and go unseat him because he's this corrupt idiot, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody cared. Like literally everybody looked at them and said, so what do you want us to do? He's your party person, go ahead, we don't care. And so the narratives of the bad ANC versus the good ANC are already dead in small towns. The ANC in small towns is dead. And so when you think about it, the country is in this stage that it's at right now, is that people are starting to notice and are starting to become proactive in what they're seeing, right? Because people are seeing this all the time, but they were like, okay, whatever. But now, like in small towns, people are willing now to tell you, we don't care about your struggle, right? We don't care that your former president is in jail. And we also think your president is basically an amoeba, because anything that happens, he just reacts in a very strange way and he sort of like hides. He's like this unicell organism that if not stimulated by something, nothing else happens. So
even when stimulated, nothing much happens.
No, when stimulated, an amoeba is surprised, just like our president. He's always surprised, right? Because the reply he gave to this, when he went out and gave his speech that we all thought was going to stabilize the nation, he basically said, you know what? The people around me haven't told me enough. I don't know what I'm going to do. So all we need to do is to protect the harbor, protect the trucks, and let's get the logistics going. Everybody else, just please calm down, guys. The 9 million unemployed guys and girls who are desperate enough to say, you know what, man, screw this. Let me go get food. I also heard people, just let me riff for a little bit. I also heard people then saying, if it's about hunger, why take a TV? Do you expect my poverty to have some sort of morality linked to it, to say, oh no, I only need meal and sugar. And so that big screen TV right there is off limits because I'm not greedy. Greed is not only for the rich. Poor people can be greedy too. I want to have a 52-inch TV. If you give me the opportunity to have one, I'm going to take it.
And maybe I sell it for meal. Who knows?
So, and I'm so mad at that. But also, when we look at the people who are looting, and I think this is important, even though this conversation is flowing, in the people that are looting, there are three people to consider here, right? One is the impoverished, desperate, one of the 9 million people who doesn't have a job, who doesn't want to be a criminal, who just needed something, and then got to the store and was like, oh, wait, now that I'm here for the meal, there's also a fridge and a nice looking stove and clothes. So I'm taking all of that, right? But then secondly, there are people who are the criminal, right? The criminal element, the people who had already given up trying to be part of society long ago, who are just like, you know what, I'm going to rob people. And then they got there and they're like, oh, now I'm going to rob a store. And so there are those people. And then the last group I think is the most deplorable are the people who are well enough in these neighborhoods, right? The person who does have a bakkie and then decides to go fill that bakkie with furniture, or go fill that bakkie with sugar and whatever to sell. I think those people for me are horrible. And I saw a guy in a Mercedes Benz.
Yeah.
And the Woolworths.
A private schoolboy.
Yeah.
I could have jumped into the TV and kicked that guy in the throat because he delegitimizes the poverty of the people around him, right? The people that were there for the purposes of trying to go like, okay, I'm at the end of my wits. And then here is a mall that's wide open for me to take things from. But then secondly, I think we also fail to notice another thing. How the people, if you look at the looting at Jabulani Mall, that for me was the scariest one. That the young people, they knew for a fact that they outnumbered the police. They knew for a fact that if we all rush this police, because remember, Jabulani Mall is right in front of Jabulani Police Station. Yes. It's right there. These guys hijacked a garbage truck and used it as a battering ram. It means these people have also thought about, so during the day, somebody thought, which way is the best way to just ransack this mall? And this just presented that opportunity we were all talking about, or sitting on the corner, having nothing to do. And so I think that also becomes a very dangerous thing. The police recruiting in this country is horrendous. Those police officers just like put their hands on their waists and they were like, they're stealing these things. It's bad, right? And then the young people have also now realized their power. And once they consolidate that, so let's assume this will all be over and our magic Cyril will come down and give us all buffaloes worth 2 million rand and we'll be happy. After this, those young people still understand that power dynamic between them and the police. That is going to be something very, very interesting to watch going into the future.
Well, Sub says quickly, just throw this in, Jonathan, and let you have a go. What about that fellow who stole coffins? That dude is cold as fuck. All right, so what do you want to say to
I just want to know what he knows. I mean, he knows his date of death. needs a coffin to be buried in. Yeah, look, inequality is often spoken about in South Africa, and it is part of the problem here. But one of the things that isn't spoken about very often is the slow decay of our moral compass. The reality is that all those various types of looters that Leeto is describing are all people who decided in the moment that this was real life Reggie's Rush. And it was their opportunity to go in and take stuff. And the reality is that's got nothing to do with poverty or wealth. That's got everything to do with morals and values. We've got 20 years of this government looting this country. We've got 40 years before that of the previous government looting the country. A reminder that all governments are the same. And the reality is that we really need to get on top of that. The other issue pointed to is the policing. I've spoken about, I know you spoke about it early in the show, but I called it Marikana syndrome not long after Marikana happened. And my concern was that obviously there were atrocities committed on the part of police at Marikana.
Sure.
The issue is that instead of saying, look, we made mistakes, but that doesn't mean public order policing is a bad thing. That doesn't mean there's no place ever for live ammunition. That doesn't mean the police cannot, Becky clearly said we must shoot to kill and everyone went nuts. Yes, I agree with the general sentiment that says we can't just shoot to kill whenever we want. But there is a time and a place to shoot to kill. And the problem we have now is that we neutered our police post Marikana, even more so than they'd been hollowed out before that with the removal of specialist units. And as a result of that, when something like this goes down, we can very much see that the police are completely unable to tackle this. Now, the only way we're going to prevent what Leeto's referring to, where people realize the police cannot control them, is by giving the police power back. One of the jobs of the state is to protect citizens. And the way they do that is through a competent police force. And I think people can't separate sometimes the difference between a competent police force, which does use force when necessary, and a police force that uses force unnecessarily. And unfortunately, in South Africa, we've got a very bad history, both in post-apartheid and pre-apartheid South Africa, whereby the police have done that.
No, I think that's a really valid point. And I think that's also part of Cyril's psychological problem at the moment is Marikana is hanging over him too. And Pumi just went like this when I asked her about it earlier. She's like, check the worry in my eyes, as a point, Cyril might make. But I do think that there's also this general inability to make decisions, which is now, it's coming home to roost. Like now is not the time to prevaricate or to try and please different factions or to try and hold the ANC together. Those days are long gone. Now we're into the hard, tough territory of life and death for some people. And we're talking about looters. But there are communities that are armed and dangerous and fighting for their survival right now. And there are things that are very, very serious about this that have less to do with a macro distribution center and more to do with people who want to live in an orderly society where there are rules and there are laws, and those laws and rules make it possible for us to live in a civilized manner together. And then the people who just don't care about those rules and laws at all. And that's the real problem. That's the division that I wrote about 2 days ago. What do you guys think of that?
I actually read that piece and I agree with it, right? And I'm very concerned about the activation of the armed people who want to protect their communities, right? From all across the board. So I heard a lot of people saying, oh, it's the whites or the Indians that are armed. But more concerning is what those people do after this episode, right? Does it mean that those people arm themselves more and consider themselves a sort of like a militia type outfit? But also, I also saw people applauding taxi drivers for the actions that they're taking, like Santaco, for instance, saying taxi drivers are prepared and will protect these malls and shopping centers because our lives are linked to transporting people to these places. And then you saw what they did with Andile Lungisa, right? Although he's like a mammoth butthole and everyone just should laugh at him, they threatened him and they said, if people riot, we're coming for you, right? And people don't understand the influence that the taxi industry has always had with violence, right? In that, in small towns, I remember in Velkom, right, in the 90s, people were more inclined to call the taxi association more than they would call the police, because the taxi association would come into your neighborhood. If we said, well, there's Leeto, he stole my cell phone or he stole my TV, they'd come in, beat him to death, and then move out, right? Mm-hmm. And so what for me is the power that comes with knowing you are feared, and you can become this outfit that becomes the police outside of the system, where the police are totally useless. Well, is for me scarier than anything else.
Leeto, if there's a vacuum, it's going to be filled, right? And if there's a security vacuum, it's going to be filled by whoever's most powerful and whoever has the most ammo. And that's what you're pointing out here. But it's going to happen whether we like it or not.
That is true. But all I'm saying is caution to it. I'm all for people protecting what is theirs and what they think is going to help them become better people. But my caution is what that means, right? Because at times it moves from beyond, because at times, like right now, you want to protect what's yours, right?
Yeah.
My fear is when that defense suddenly turns to offense because we are scared that these people will come again. So let's just go kill 2 or 3 of them to show them not to come and mess with us, right? Just the example with Andile Lungisa, right? We all hate him. He's an idiot. We don't like him. But the threat, even though it's funny, because he folded and he was like, I'm sorry, don't loot, Zuma can go rot in jail. The biggest problem is that violence that these people will now hold over society might become something we all never bargained for, right? Because we can hold the state accountable. We can point at Begitkel and say, you're an idiot. You see what you did wrong? Mm-hmm. Can you really point at them and tell them that? And so it's just a word of caution to the wise, or not so wise in this case.
Yeah.
More than that, earlier I spoke about 80s flashback for me. And what we're seeing today is playing out on a larger scale. What happened in the 80s and the early 90s, predominantly in townships, and now it's spilling over into the whole country. And everyone's favorite EFFer, Witt Nthoba. I don't know if many people know this, but his PhD
was atrocious.
Actually, but what it is about is it's about what happened to all those young people who were in what they used to call SDUs, self-defense units in the townships, who had become hyper-militarized. And when the new dispensation came in 1994, they were essentially just became irrelevant. There were no more street committees. There were no more organized groups of people that were trying to protect their little piece of South Africa in their streets. So they were called SDUs. And all of those guys, mainly, most of them, and where he comes from in the Val, a lot of them became the Tsotsis that started ruling by fear in the townships, right? That's what they became. And that's what Leeto's talking about even now. That's what happens after this. What happens when the imminent threat is now gone, and the power that the taxi drivers have, the taxi owners have, the armed young people from Bluff, somebody said, the armed boys from Bluff, somebody said earlier, who now know that they have this power and they are unchecked, and there's a police service that is unable to call them to order. That's what chaos.
Don't we have to lay the blame for that at the feet of this administration and the administrations before it, because they've hollowed out the police and made the police a laughing stock. No one takes Becky Taylor seriously. No one's afraid.
But that doesn't solve our problem. Laying the blame at this point is not going to solve our problem. We have to think about what comes after. How do we rebuild? How do we move forward from where we are?
Nothing comes after, Pumi. Like this idea, I'm really tired of, no matter what happens, gun owners are being demonized as these boogeymen, and even if they haven't done anything bad yet, and even though they show good faith again and again and again, they must be demonized that they might do something down the road which we won't like. those SDU units turned into Tsotsis and terrorized their communities because their communities were unarmed and untrained to deal with them. The realities is that there is nothing special about the police force. Those people who are guarding their communities probably have more training than the police. Do you know that the police fire 15 rounds once a year as their entire firearms training? Anyone carrying a weapon on the street protecting their suburb and community is doing way more training than that in the firing range. The policeman has no training and basically a uniform and a couple of epaulets and flashes, and we go, oh, they're the arbiters of this sort of protection. The reality is that South Africa hasn't had a competent police force for more than a decade. We have a security services 3 times the size of the police force. The reality is that if the security services wanted to organize a coup in this country, they could, because they are 3 times the size of the police services.
And that is not what is
Jonathan?
in question here, Jonathan. So it's not about gun owners who are responsible. We're talking about what we're seeing today. Is we're seeing gun owners shooting people point blank in the streets. Hold on.
That's not happening.
Hold on.
That's not happening.
Don't be emotional. Don't be emotional. Just
not an
listen to
emotion.
what I'm saying
I'm
to you.
objecting to lies.
Listen to what I am saying to you. Okay?
Okay.
So it is not about people who are currently protecting themselves and protecting their property and protecting their communities. That's not what we are talking about. We are talking about what it is that happens when that vacuum that we're talking about is created. And not everybody who is a gun owner, who is a trained gun owner, is a benevolent gun owner. So just disabuse
exactly
yourself
why
of
everyone
that
should be a gun
notion
owner.
That's exactly what.
Hey. No. Not where I come from. Not where I come from, Jonathan. And the problem is there's this assumption of this righteous gun owner who's responsible and legal. Where I come from, all the gun owners are not righteous, and most of the guns are not legal.
That's right.
And so
criminals are not righteous. And
no,
don't
not
care about
criminals.
laws.
Not criminals. There are people who
the minute
own
you're
guns.
not righteous, you become a criminal because you're likely breaking the law, Leeto.
No, there are people in my neighborhood who have guns, who never use them in a nefarious way, but those guns are illegal.
But then they're criminals.
That means they're lawbreakers, correct? They're criminals by definition.
Oh, so if I have a piece of paper that says I should have a gun, I'm a criminal.
Yes.
But if I don't, I'm not a criminal.
No, if you have
you said illegal weapons.
Yeah, I mean that's cut and dried.
No. Those weapons aren't illegal. The weapons are legal. They get get the weapons from the police.
Okay,
right?
they license
They get the
firearms.
weapons. No. They get the firearms from the police.
Yeah.
But they have no
they get
license
sold by the police.
firearm.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Well, that's against the law, Leeto.
Yeah.
They're criminals by definition.
Right. But now you are saying, oh, it's against the law. So next time he points a gun at me, I must just say to him, hey, this gun is against the law. Because that's the problem you're missing, is that
next time someone points a gun at you, you should be able to point a gun back at them and go, if you don't stop pointing that gun at me, you're going to die. Which is exactly what happened on our streets the other day, which Pumi was trying to point out as gun owners just shooting people in the face, which is not what happened. Because when people threw stones and fired weapons at people protecting their property, they fired back, which is completely within the law.
Yeah, I just want to quickly direct in a useful way here, because I don't want this to become about gun ownership. I think that
I have Gideon on for that.
No, but I believe that this is an argument which we'll carry on having. But at this stage, I would much rather have legal firearm owners as my neighbors in a tough situation than have people who are unarmed all around me. And gun-free South Africa, I'm sure you can phone them 100 times and they'll put up notices and arrive and make speeches, but they're going to be useless to you in a situation like this. So let's just
as proven. How do we go through the last 72 hours and have this argument?
I agree, but Pumi, you brought up at the beginning of the show this morning this thing that's happening in Phoenix right now, and this is a very, very difficult thing to talk about in South Africa because it does involve those things which we've skirted by for a long time. There's a little bit of tribalism here, there's a bit of racism going on here because people do decamp into these areas when things get a bit tough. So what's happening in Phoenix now is it's being put together as this Indian versus Zulu situation. What do you guys think of that, and what do you make as a solution for coming out of this problem?
So if I can start this off. So I think that the Indian versus Zulu situation is one that we conveniently ignored as South Africans, right? Because it was nicer to point at the whites and say, yeah, the whites are racist, they hate us, right? But the Indians versus Zulu situation is one that we all conveniently decided to forget, that these two races don't get along, even though they live alongside each other. And there has been a tension there that has boiled and is now manifesting itself. And so the biggest problem is that since it hasn't been spoken about and everybody just keeps coming to these communities and saying, oh, quit trying to kill each other, or quit burning these people's shacks, or quit shooting these people. The problem there is that nobody actually got to the core of why these two groups hate each other that much, to the point at which you can leave your house and go and burn somebody's shack down, right? And so the first question that we must ask is, where does it stem from? And what do we do? Because it was basically, if you want to boil it down to the simplest form, the Group Areas Act was very responsible for that, right? This line that divides these two communities and the fear of crossing that line. Like in Welkom, for instance, let me just use my small town as an example. There's a place called Bronville. Bronville is where all the coloureds live. In my whole life, I've lived here ever since I was born in 1989. I have never gone to Bronville, and I am still afraid to go to Bronville. I have no idea why, right? But I'm afraid to go to where the coloureds are. And so in times of strife, me and the coloured will always fight, right? It's the one from Tabong. Oh, no, it's the one from Bronville. And so starting from there, the fear starts to breed and basically multiply itself 100-fold. And then you get to the point that we are now. And people are not trying to get to the core, but always want to de-escalate. We love this thing of de-escalation. But we should get to the core of why these two communities hate each other and try to get them over that bridge. And not everybody's going to love each other from those communities. Some of them are still going to want to shoot each other in the face. But what we should be doing is getting the majority of the people to get to understand the other side. But now I think it's also being pushed to a place where it might be irreconcilable. I'm poor, I live in a shack, and you come and burn my shack. I think that's...
Do you want to add anything to what Leeto said here?
Look, I think the racial divides in this country run true and deep. And they're always going to be the easiest place to go to say this is what is problematic. It's the easiest place, and it's one that we can easily see. We can see it in our faces, you know. But the real problems that we have in this country are about the inequity. It's about the disenfranchised people. It's about the fact that we have 25 million people unemployed. We have 30 million people living on 20 Rand a day. Those things, and it becomes a thing of who has and who doesn't. And when you look at who has, again, because of historical reasons, the races run from different places. But right now, the biggest haves in this country are people sitting in our government, are people with political patronage. Those are the people that have. And we're now in a place where the angry, hungry, jobless masses have overrun everything else, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that anger, and
Jonathan,
then it plays out along all of the various lines of discontent that we have. Where the Russians are, that is where it is playing out.
Do you want to add something to this, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I just think that South Africa loves identity politics. It's where we've come from as a country. We almost invented it for the rest of the world in some respects. And again, it's true that a lot of the problems we have lead to these issues, but we're not really asking the questions of how did we get to these problems in the first place. What is the reason that we've got the inequity that Pumi's referring to? What are our financial and economic policies that led us here? What are our social policies that led us here? I'm yet to see anyone really try have this discussion to, instead of going, well, the Indians and the whites and the blacks and all the rest of that, Sure, in a moment of strife, any South African is going to rise up against the first thing they can try and blame, and in South Africa, that's just standard. You blame race. But the reality is we have 20 years at least now of very bad policy by our government, championed by many people, both in the corporate world and in the media world and in the academic world, which has led us to this point. And we're either going to choose to change those policies and realize that nobody is being helped. I mean, the fact that we have a billionaire BEE president who really has provided very little value to the world in comparison to other billionaires, the fact that is a reality, and nobody has opened their eyes and gone, well, maybe this isn't working. Maybe we should stop following Soviet policy. You know, one of the things that really bothered me with regards to some of the responses to my tweet thread was that people don't know the history of the ANC. They don't know the things that Rob Davies and other people are writing. They don't know the internal policy documents. We have a government that fully believes.
It's so boring that no one can be bothered to troll through it. But my God,
true.
If you spent 5 minutes looking at it, you'd realize how completely barren their ideology's been since the 70s.
It is full of Lenin and Stalin, those people, and Mao now. Those people are failed individuals who murdered millions upon millions of people. We need to abandon this ideology. I know that people want to demonize things like capitalism and the free market, but the socialism and communism path is not working for us. It's not helping. And don't tell me about rich people in Sandton. That's crony capitalism. They have hooked up with the government and they are in bed with them. If COVID didn't show you that, nothing will.
Yeah. I mean, they were the main implementers of government policy for the longest time. Look at the insurance companies and the health companies. I mean, anyway,
absolutely.
I think that's a valid point, but it doesn't help people who are frightened in Phoenix today. It doesn't help people in Umlazi who are frightened today, and it doesn't help people in Umhlanga who are worried today. What do you guys suggest as the best course of action out of this, and what do you think is on the other side? Do you think there is a rebuilding that's likely to take place? Do you think that someone is going to fill these vacuums in leadership, in violence, in force, in power? What's going to happen? What's the next step? We've only got 10 minutes left of this. I'd like to hear where you think we go from here. Leeto, you can start. That's been the pattern so far this morning.
Okay, so the rebuilding is going to be very difficult because what happens after points like this is the reverting to your base instinct. Your base instinct now as a business owner is to reinforce the Group Areas Act, right? Is to take your business and say it's risky to go into the township, even though they say there's an economy there to be exploited. I'm going to take my mall and leave. I'm going to take my Mr. Price and go, because every time I go there, if it does get looted, because remember, the actuaries would actually tell business owners to say, if you want to take your business into those neighborhoods, we are going to charge you more for insurance because those people are a huge risk. Right? And so most people are going to go back into their little corners because that's the safest option. Now, the problem with that is it's going to be one of the riskiest periods in South Africa post 1994, because from here, then there are leaders who are going to come and exploit desperation. And there are leaders who are very good at that. And I know you said you shouldn't call them leaders, but we should call them that for now, right? Is that Bantu Holomisa is very good at speaking to a desperate person who needs militarization. He's one of the people to look out for. Julius Malema is trying to fashion himself in that way. And he's already spoken about this unled revolution. So his next step is to say, you see what happens when you have an unled revolution? I'm here to lead you. Right? He wants to come and fill that vacuum. And so the biggest issue now is that if we don't disarm the 9 million plus young people who have energy, who have time, if we don't disarm them with opportunities, we are going to be in a much worse of situation in the next year or so, where that 9 million turns to 10 or 11 million. And so the biggest problem for me is that the people who are in a place to make the changes are going to revert back to their corners. which is not the wise thing to do, but the safe thing to do. Being safe is not going to be what's going to take us forward. And I think the outlook should be one of exploration and, Christopher Columbus, if we put it in that way. Just drive a ship somewhere and try and help those people and say, I'm here to help you, but colonize them until they can call you a racist.
that doesn't sound like a great plan by social anthropology means. I mean, there are academics all over the country who, if they heard you say that, would be recoiling in horror. What do you think the answers are, Jonathan? I'll let Pumi round it up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any answers, and I'm not sure anyone else does for, people worried today and who have lived through a few nights of, ongoing violence and gunfire and are worried to leave their houses, etc. And I do empathize with that. There is no answer to that. I think in some cases, in my opinion, the answer has been the communities taking things into their own hands and protecting themselves for the moment. Yes, that's not necessarily having your husband patrolling the streets is not necessarily an ongoing answer. I think South Africans need to look to the medium and long term. They need to look towards that. We need to remember that this government is voted into power by a minority of citizens. At the end of the day, the ANC gets a little over 10 million votes. And there are enough people in this country, even if every single one of those 10 million people still vote for them, and in my view, they still will. The reality is there are enough people to unseat the government. The greatest stability in this country was Nelson Mandela's government, which was a unity government. It had many voices from many different aspects. There were trade unionists in it, but there were also very ardent capitalists in it. We had a finance minister with his head screwed on about how the world worked and how countries get rich. And the reality is we need to start looking towards that. If only we could get away from silly arguments like, the DA is a white party, or does anyone really believe that this week would have been worse if the DA were in power? I mean, seriously. And the reality is everyone makes those memes about Cape Town and Cape Town pointing their noses down at the rest of the country. Why, guys? What's different in Cape Town? Tell me. What's different in the Western Cape? Never mind just Cape Town. There are poor areas in the Western Cape. There are angry people in the Western Cape. There's a lot of problems in the Western Cape. The DA hasn't solved all of those. I'm not under any illusion. But the reality is that we need to start looking at things as a country and deciding where we want to go. And we need to understand the problems that have led us to this point. And hopefully, communities can start making better decisions for themselves. So that we don't end up in this point ever again.
Well, otherwise, all that inequality that Pumi was talking about earlier is just going to be exacerbated. Like Leeto says, that the shops are going to pull out of the townships. The people who have guns are going to get more guns. And all that ends up happening is that the power dynamics become much more entrenched. And that's not good.
We're at a precipice, I think, and hopefully we haven't passed it. But there's a point at which countries get to where the levels of unemployment, poverty, hopelessness, lack of education, no way out, just basically compound, and you cannot ever get out of them. And we've seen that in some South American countries, in some other African countries. I still think there's a chance to save it in South Africa, but we need to make significant changes in the way we do things as a country, in the way our politicians behave, in who governs us, and in what they do when they govern us.
Pumi, it's over to you to close it off this morning. What do you have to say?
My favorite thing about this morning is both Leeto and Jonathan keep talking about we. We need to make better decisions. We need to make changes. We need to take control of our own futures. And I think the most important thing is for all of us to realize that we is made up of you and me. So you and I have to do something in order for things to change. We cannot be sitting here hoping that somebody else is going to step up and make the change, hoping that somebody else is going to step up and provide leadership. We have to do it.
That's beautifully said. I'm just going to quickly end off with something from Tracy here, who's I think it's Tracy who sent this message. Yeah, she says, I recall David Attenborough's reflection of that jar with the red ants and the black ants. Everybody's getting along fine in the jar until someone shakes the jar, and then they start killing each other. So we need to ask in this country, who is shaking the jar? I think that's a very valid point to end on. So Leeto Nthoba, Phumi Mashego, Jonathan Witt, thank you all very much for a very elucidating discussion this morning. I'm sure that we will have plenty more to talk about in the coming weeks, but you've all been tremendously helpful. And hopefully there'll be people who are listening now who are able to make more sense. Certainly you've helped me of this madness all around us. And also hopefully we'll return to the Burning Platform next week in a South Africa with a lot less violence and criminality and falling into racial and ethnic and tribal lines of hatred. And let's see that we can get again the we to the forefront of all of this, Phumi. Very, very nice. Thanks, guys. Have an excellent day. That is the Burning Platform. It's brought to you by Nando's. Thank you to all of our guests, and most especially thank you to you for